Welcome to Marshall, Parker, and Weber's webinar and live Facebook, 10 Tips for Children of Aging Parents. My name is Tammy Weber. I'm a certified elder law attorney, and I'm here with Karen Griswold. Hi.
Hi, Tammy.
This is going to be fun. All right. We get started. I want to just tell you that we're going to talk today about the topic, and laws changed often. So what we're saying today is not substitute for really good legal advice and a thorough discussion with your family and your attorneys. So let's start with 10 tips. So Karen, is this one of the questions we always ask?
We always do, Tammy.
So really, Karen, have you had the conversations necessary to know your parents' preferences?
I have.
Okay.
With one set of parents.
Let's talk about the tips.
So ideally, the time you want to have this conversation with your parents is before a crisis hits. That's the perfect world, and that's what we should try to hit for. Parents will tend to give you cues early. All you have to do is listen. Ideally, if you can spend time in the home environment with them, that's really going to educate you. I noticed, for example, with my parents, I'm long distance, so what I heard on the phone was different than when I actually got to live with them, spend time with them. So if you have that opportunity, it's really a blessing for everybody and helps. Moving forward, as you have the discussions, you want to involve your siblings, whether it's face-to-face or over a telephone. We all have our gifts. We all have things to contribute. But what we do want to remember is that our parents are still in control. You want to keep in mind that with aging, there's a slowness to the processing of memory, so the information takes a little bit longer to process than when you're younger. And then also with your hearing, there's limited hearing. So all those things you want to factor in. What you don't want to do is overwhelm your parents, Tammy.
It's true, and it's best, everybody there, they can hear it as well. So if one of the parents has a question a couple days later, you don't turn into that whisper down the lane game where, you call one and they
Turns into an elephant.
Exactly. Well, that's really good, and it helps increase the likelihood that your parents are going to get what they want.
Absolutely.
The more you talk about it.
I think that's what everybody's goal is.
Yeah. And so when you're preparing for this, our second tip is to really educate yourself. There are many public seminars. There are some that you should go to and some that you shouldn't. Mm-hmm. And when I say that, we've all had experiences with traveling. I call them the traveling revocable living trust crew that talk to seniors and they promise them things and choose to sell them things that don't protect their assets from the costs of long-term care, which is one of the big issues. So you want to look and see who those professionals are. Do they have certifications? For example, Karen is a certified elder law coordinator.
Right.
And I'm a certified elder law attorney, along with 2 other people here at Marshall, Parker, and Weber. There are plenty of resources. There is one that we have on the page now for people who are joining us by webinar, the Adult Children of Aging Parents resource page. And on that, there are suggested books, reviews, what you can read, what's helpful, what isn't helpful. Also a list of websites. This I found very interesting. Karen, some of your care management clients, you go with them to the doctor. There's actually a website that helps you. What did my doctor say? To interpret it. The translation. There are also caregiver websites, and there's links on this ACAP website about how do you compare nursing facilities, if that's something you're looking into. Or there are many apps for your phone for caregivers. And those are great ways to educate yourself.
One other thing is each state is specific in their benefits and programs, and the revocable living trust, when Tammy mentioned that, that's what made it pop into my head, is you want to focus your education and research on the state where your parents are located, because it's very state specific.
Correct. Pennsylvania is much different than Florida, for example. Also, there are organizations and links to organizations on this particular website and others, but on the Medicare.gov or Social Security or Veterans Administration, or, I have to talk about our website, paelderlaw.com. There are many resources and blog articles available there. And for those of you who are familiar with us, who like us on Facebook, or who follow us, you know that our firm has a monthly newsletter that we call the Marshall Parker Law Alert. And that has what I like to call as late-breaking tips and things that are happening in the area of elder law. So there are lots of ways to educate yourself, and that's our tip number 2. And when you move forward in this process, tip number 3, Karen, tell us what we should look at here.
This one's significant, and I think you can really do a lot of pre-planning on this. You don't have to wait till a crisis hits. This to me is critical. You want to compile a list of doctors and medications, and that list is going to be fluid. And you want to know the diagnosis of your parents. That's, again, speaking from experience, that's critical, knowing what your parents' current diagnoses are, as well as allergies. These are things we take for granted, but do you know what your parents are allergic to? That makes a big difference if they're taken to the emergency room. That's stuff you have to be able to hand off and rattle off right away. Something else you can do in advance is the HIPAA forms. You can put them on file if your parents are okay with that and agree with you asking questions of the physicians. You can put that on file ahead of time, so when that crisis hits, that it's smooth. You're dealing with a lot of emotions and a lot of things at the time of crisis, and what you don't want to be doing is trying to locate paperwork or sign new forms. And when you're planning for the transition to the next stage, the education that you gathered from tip 2 will be extremely useful. Is the spouse going to assist in the care? I think you really need to be realistic about that long term.
That's a tough one.
It sure
is. It can
is.
wear down.
It definitely can.
The other
and I
person.
think when you actually spend a weekend or time with your parents, that's when you're really going to be able to see the wear and tear on that. You want your mom and dad to maintain their husband and wife relationship. You don't want them at that last stage in their life to have all those ill feelings that we all know come up when you're providing care for someone.
And there's a lot of guilt associated with that as well. So another thing, just sort of a corollary to that, is look into support groups.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Support groups, I know time's always a factor, but there's just so much good information shared there in the support groups. And then you want to know, what do your parents want to do? Do they want to stay at home? Are they okay transitioning to a personal care type environment? There's different levels of care. They're all decisions. You can have all the education and information and present it to them for them to make the best decision they can. Again, you don't want to overwhelm them, but you can do all that research and education behind the scenes and help them in that way.
It looks like our Facebook audience is growing. We've got Shelby and Sarah and Joe and Joey. I don't know. There's a big list. So great. Thanks for tuning in. And we're now moving on to tip number 4. This can get a little tricky. But it's important to know who your parents' financial, legal, insurance providers are. And as you have these conversations with your parents, it's not going to get all done in the first time, right, Karen?
No.
Too overwhelming, as you
Correct.
said. So this is a process, and it's multiple conversations, and those conversations the information you get from them may change because your parents changed their ideas, but they typically don't change their providers. So you can just say, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm not asking how much money you have in the bank. Just if there's an emergency, who is your bank? Who's your banker? Who's your financial provider? Where do you get your homeowner's insurance or your long-term care insurance from? And this is good too, because typically if you're dealing with two parents that are still alive or a parent and a significant other, they've decided who does what in the relationship. So maybe the parent, say it's your father, has this information and your mom doesn't know. And so it's a good thing to help with the conversation between them without causing any issues. So having both parents know as well, don't you think?
That's really helpful. You know, we even had a case where we needed to know the car insurance. It was an auto accident that impacts Medicare. We spent too much time looking for car insurance.
So
something simple.
Yeah, if you just start a binder for your parents and ask them if it's okay if you get a copy and just have a list. And as it changes, you just update it. The next tip is be aware of their current benefits, the numbers of those benefits, and the contact information. So we're just hitting the high points here, but many of our clients or our parents have retirement benefits. They've worked a long time. They're getting a pension. Where does that pension come from? And if they've been retired for 25 years, these companies may have been purchased and resold, and the HR contact person changes. And Karen and I have both been down that rabbit hole of where's the new ownership company, and they're in Minnesota or something, and they started here in Pennsylvania. So it's important to keep contact. And if one of your parents would pass on, what election was made? In other words, does that surviving spouse continue to get that retirement, and what's the percentage?
Because most of these companies some companies will reach out to you, but
You're right.
You don't want to depend on that.
No. And if you lose a parent and there's a single spouse moving forward, typically their income is lower, so it's very important to know the percentage they're entitled to. And again, you don't have to know the number of the monthly income. You can just know if it's 100%, 0%, or 50%, or typically the options. And then where's their Medicare supplement coming from? What's their number? What's their card? Some of our clients and even some staff here at Marshall Parker and Weber have just taken pictures on their cell phone of all of these cards, and they keep it. So it's really easy.
That's handy.
It's handy. And these days everybody travels with their cell phone. So if something comes up, you got it. As parent getting veterans benefits, either a disability, a compensation, or an aid in attendance. How's that happening? Long-term care insurance. Very, very important as you're thinking about aging, especially in place. Older policies really were for nursing facilities. But the newer policies have riders, so if somebody is in a personal care home or wants to have care at home, you need to know what are the bells and whistles, how much per day.
And again, that's something you can get listed on in advance.
Exactly.
So you have access to that information at
Right.
the time of need. Again, one other hurdle you don't have to jump.
And sometimes we see these old policies that when we got them, 20 years ago, they were for $100 a day, which was a significant amount of payment. But today we're sitting here with an average daily cost of $321.95 a day. So if they purchase what's called an inflation rider, that may get that $100 much closer. Okay. Tip 6. So, what are the current assets? How are they titled? Sometimes this leads to some surprises, even for the parents. So do they have their accounts at ABC Bank? Typically, depending on the age, there's some multiple accounts. And there's some hidden slush fund accounts. We've seen that, right, Karen?
Yes, we have.
A lot gets revealed at the attorney table, which is all private. But are they retirement accounts or non-retirement accounts? Meaning, if they needed to be liquidated for a reason, is Uncle Sam going to need some deferred income tax? And that's important to know. Do they own deeds? Have they had a family cabin for a really long time? And how do they own it? They may own it with their siblings and not know if the sibling dies, what happens. So get all of that together. Same with titles, cars, boats, motorhomes, very important to have. And replacing them can happen, but again, that's a stress at a time of a crisis. And we've also, now I see Karen just joined. Hi, Karen. A different Karen than you. Tip number 7. Ask your parents where they keep their legal papers. Now, this can start to get a little feeling invasive, and the parents feel like, oh. Now, a lot of our clients have a binder. And depending on when we did their planning, it could be green, it could be brown, or it could be blue, and they usually say, hey, if something happens, the blue binder is in the top desk drawer.
And that makes it nice, because
Yeah.
if we get the call too, we can narrow down the search.
Exactly. Color's important. And do they have the key documents? So, a financial power of attorney and a healthcare directive are 2 of the key documents that apply while they're living. And they would have chosen whether their agents can act, whether they're competent or not. And the laws change a lot, especially with the financial power of attorney. So if they're old or change circumstances when you find that power of attorney, saying, hey, maybe we should have a review.
Or if your parents have recently moved into the state, good time to dust them off and get them looked at.
Correct. And there are different kinds of healthcare directives that could be present here in Pennsylvania. There's a healthcare power of attorney. There's an advance directive and a living will, the PULSE form, a DNR. Some people fill out the 5 Wishes program, and all of those need to work together. And so another reason why you want your parent to have a review with a certified elder law attorney, or at least have all the team together, because they could unwittingly, by doing something at a hospital and a 5 Wishes, revoke really good planning.
Which happens frequently.
Yeah, it does. And then the will is the document that comes into play when mom or dad pass and they have things in their name alone. One of the big things people say, oh, I don't have the will, the state gets everything. No, that's not true. But if you don't have the will, the state does say where it goes. So, for example, if your parents are on a second marriage and your mom dies and she has $100,000, and she says, well, no big deal, I don't need to do a will, it's going to go to my second husband. No, that's not the law. The law currently is the spouse gets the first $30,000 of that $100,000. And the remaining gets divided half between the spouse and the adult children of the prior relationship. So just an example, might not be what you want, is the bottom line. Another key document, especially when we talk about long-term care planning, is the trust. And in this term, it's an irrevocable trust as opposed to a revocable trust. And we have a webinar saved on our YouTube page that you could go to. I believe that my partner Matt Parker did along with you, Karen. Is that true?
I don't remember.
All right. Well, that's going to be a mystery. So now everybody has to tune in and go to paelderlaw.com and click on YouTube. And if somebody does this by the end, you might win an MPW umbrella. Okay, here we go. So those of you on Facebook, go. And the other thing is your beneficiary circumstances may have changed. Often clients have a child who suffered some kind of physical change, and it happens in their 20s or so, and they haven't worked long enough to be eligible for Social Security disability. So they receive SSI, or Supplemental Security Income. And the parents might think, oh, that's great, I'm leaving money to them, but that's going to cause them to lose their access card, right, Karen?
That's significant.
Yeah. So again, and then the last question to look at is, what's your role? So you're sitting there with your parents and say, well, did you pick me? Am I doing something? Exactly. Some of us are suited to handle financial matters. Some of us are suited to handle more healthcare. Some of us get really queasy when they go.
It's a team effort.
Exactly.
It really is.
And the more you hear it again with all the siblings or whomever the team is, it may not necessarily just be you and your brothers and sisters. It may be fill in the blank, brother, sister, neighbor, etc. So once you got to this step, and this is usually, now we might be 3 or 4 conversations into it, and this next step might be in talking here in the lawyer's office. But Karen, in your role with care management, with all of your clients that are at home or transitioning, talk a little bit about the home and what we do.
And I want to share something hot off the press. Tammy shared this with me this morning that took place down at the Capitol yesterday. Jan Burnett, the Deputy Secretary in the Office of Long-Term Living, was speaking. And she says, and we probably know this, but she shared that Pennsylvania has the highest population over the age of 65, with 89% of those wanting to stay at home. So that's significant to know. And living at home, it reduces the risk of illness, it's safer, and it provides a sense of security for the individual. And it is also less expensive and less of a burden on the taxpayers. So that's really, clearly is the direction that everybody wants to move towards. It's a win-win for everybody. The home assessments, there are definitely a lot of home assessment tools. You can research on the internet, Medicare, the website Tammy shared earlier. And essentially what you do is it goes through the home and identifies areas that you want to pay attention to as your parents age. Things when you were younger were not an obstacle, but soon become one. The modifications and the areas you want to pay attention to are really going to depend on the diagnosis of your parents, because they are individual, as well as the home environment. So it really depends on their home. And if you're not comfortable doing that assessment, there's a lot of professionals out there and care managers that could step in and do that for the family, so they don't have to do that on their own. A lot of it is common sense, but it's, boy, is it ever nice to have a checklist to go down through so you don't skip anything. You want to keep in mind that safety and independence is big. As you transition through this stage in life, there's a lot being lost. So I think you want to let your parents, everybody loves their parents, and they want to do what's best for them.
So the approach is, we want you to be safe and stay at home,
Yeah.
and this might help.
Yes.
Because you don't want to have them perceive you're trying to take over their
And
life.
that really is.
Yeah.
You need to just remember and focus that these are your parents. They've done so much for you. They are still in control. We all have our own opinions, whether we agree or disagree, but we need to respect those. And each of our family members can step in and help as well. We all have our own gifts. And everybody really can contribute. You want to just explore all the benefits. There's just so many, it's overwhelming. Again, you don't really need to, depends on your parents, you know your parents, how much you want to involve them. You could really filter through all of this and identify what benefits and programs are going to work for your parents. Ideally, you want to put something in place long term. You don't want a Band-Aid. You want to look at something, you want to look at this as fluid, and it's going to carry them through that whole stage as smooth and comfortable as possible.
And some of our parents expect their children to help take care of them. That's more the minority. And some kids expect to help mom or dad, and parents don't want that. They want, on the whole, don't you agree?
Yeah.
They had their chance to live their life, and they want their adult children to do the same. So that's a big discussion.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a step back, how would you like someone, coming into your life and saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how you're going to do it. You just need to present it to them and let them make the decision.
And oftentimes then, even if the kids are helping, how are the children going to be paid? And this can be a sticky thing to navigate. If we think down the road, and that's our job, to plan ahead, that if parents would ever apply for Medicaid to pay for their care, there's a presumption in that law that says if kids help parents, they do it because they love them. Yeah. And not to get paid. And if you pay them, it's getting treated just like a disqualifying transfer. So something needs to be done. And it also can mess up the family dynamic. If you have a sibling in California and there's a sibling here in Pennsylvania taking care of mom or dad, most of the time the California child doesn't think it's any big deal.
Right.
In terms of time, and then if you add in the layer of giving mom or dad's money to the caregiver, people get a little bit out of their nose out of joint. So, and again, very important things. There are ways to get children to be approved caregivers under the medical assistance waiver program for people who want to stay at home. So we're just touching the surface here, but something to think about. And as we go along, you're developing, which is tip 9, your parents' strategy and options for long-term care. Hi, Cody. Thanks for joining. Hope you're going to learn something here. We wrote statistics, and the way it looks now is at age 65, the percentage is 70% of people who are going to need some type of long-term care during their lifetime. And of those, 40% are going to need care for more than 2 years. So this is significant. And when you add in somebody who is otherwise healthy, like my father-in-law was, but has a dementia diagnosis and Alzheimer's disease, you could be looking at 12 to 15 years. Yeah. And that's a big deal. And how do you pay for long-term care? We've done other webinars about this, so I'm just going to hit the high points and know that we give many public seminars. You can check on our website as to the next one that is upcoming. But one of the big misconceptions we hear is, oh, Medicare will pay for my stay if I need to go to the nursing home. And it's very limited. It's limited to if you've been in the hospital and admitted for 3 overnights and you're discharged most 20 days in full. And then days 21 to 100, it's a combination of Medicare, and if your parents have a supplement, some of them do not. But after that 100 days or before, there's a possibility that they say Medicare's done, and if you can't be discharged at home safely, the options are paying out of pocket. And I mentioned earlier that's significant. We're looking at over $117,000 a year. Another option is through Veterans Administration, perhaps aid and attendance. So if your parent or the spouse of a deceased parent served as a veteran during a period of wartime, there's some possible additional money, and we can help you look to see whether or not that would apply. And then when you apply oh great, thank you for Shelby sending us a good tips comment. All right, she's thinking about her parents. When you apply for Medicaid, either in the nursing facility, at home under the waiver program, or for what's called the LIFE program, Living Independently for Elders, and we don't have one in every county.
No.
Again,
specific for
it's
the
specific.
county.
You got it, Karen. if you apply that way, the next question that the government says is they look back 5 years from the date of the application and ask whether you've given away, you or your spouse, anything no more than $500 total in a calendar month. And if you have, it's called a disqualifying transfer, and there's a period of time that your parent is not going to be eligible for medical assistance. So that's how things are paid, and the gifts implication. So most people in planning ahead think about the Family Asset Protection Trust, which is a way to take assets that the government would deem available to pay for your care if you apply for Medicaid, and convert them into the unavailable column. And you do that, but you have to give up some control.
You do, and
Yeah.
a lot of that is then it's money that's available to help the parents.
Correct.
They get other programs. That pot's always available for the parents.
Yeah. So it's complicated. It has to be done in a particular way, and I urge you to, search our website for the articles on that and tune into that webinar. Have we gotten an answer yet, Stacy, about who did the...
I don't think I was on.
Okay, all right. See, I'm giving you credit, Karen.
I don't.
You're such a big help. Here we go. The last tip today is know your risks. So when your parents need to go to a nursing facility or have some kind of care, the best rule of thumb is have them sign themselves in. But often can't be done. Their memory's impaired, they're in pain, they might not be awake. So if you are signing, do not sign on the guarantor line. If you sign on the guarantor line, you are making a third-party contract. I don't care if you're the neighbor. You're saying, I'll pay for that bill. If you're signing as power of attorney, make sure you sign Karen Griswold, power attorney, and not responsible person. The big controversial, and I don't know, it just continues to be controversial even though it's been in the area of this law for 300 or 400 years here in Pennsylvania, is what's called filial responsibility. And that concept is that spouses or children can be liable for the care costs of the parent. Now, if things are done correctly, typically this doesn't come into play. We had an unusual case in the past 2 years called Iori versus Iori, where this 90-year-old woman, she knew what she wanted. And she says, I'm staying at home and I want 24-hour care. I'm not going to the nursing home. And she didn't have the money to pay for it. So she sued 2 of her children and said, hey, you pay for this under filial responsibility. And the one says, son goes, well, wait a minute, I don't even get along with you. We don't have a good relationship. And in addition to that, I have this responsibility, this financial responsibility to put my stepchild through college. And the court says, no, the paying for a stepchild to go to college is not a defense to your obligation under filial responsibility. And the son was ordered to pay $400 a month towards mom's care. So I see we're coming to the end of our webinar today. I'm not seeing any questions on our webinar slides, and I don't see anything on Facebook as well. So I thank everyone for joining us. Our Facebook, it will continue on Facebook, and if anybody has any questions, please contact us at webmail@paelderlaw.com, and we'd be happy to answer them for you. Have a good day. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.